So if you're shooting by yourself in Colorado by a river and a highway on the other side, it's really scary. Luckily I didn't lose it. But yeah, so one of the paddleboarders did try to help me by dragging the drone across the ground and scratching the lens all up of the 360 camera. So that was one of the problems, is that the drones aren't made to have that on them. So you either need a way to get the 360 camera on and off easily, or have someone to catch the drone for you when it lands. Other issues that we run into is stabilization. You can go get a gimbal for your 360 camera, but the way the gimbals work traditionally, they're going to have an arm that's going to be in your shot. You can, to your best ability, you can try to stick a camera like this that only has one stitch line in a gimbal, so that you can do your best to just kind of like have the stitch mark right on the arm of the gimbal, but I suspect that you're going to have issues. So you kind of have to get creative in mounting. Now I found a little 3D printed connector that allowed me to easily connect my any 360 camera right to the center middle of my DJI Phantom. I just searched for 360 video mounts on drone and found this 3D printed thing from China, and it works great.
What sorts of stabilization issues do you have?
So you would have basically a shake. So big stabilization, not so much of a problem. You can probably fix that in the software. In AutoPanner, which we'll show you later, has stabilization options. But the shake, if you don't work to minimize the shake, you're probably not going to be able to get rid of it. So I would say the shake of the drone is the biggest problem. The more expensive the drone, the less shake you'll get. I believe the DJI Inspire does a great job.
What was the name of the item you got from China? It was 3D printed, you said?
The item that I got from China for the 360 camera on the drone, it didn't really have a name. I just searched for 360 connector rig for drone. Like, it was just a long name. They just were like, that's what people will be searching for.
Cuts out the arm or?
No, it's just a connector that connects it to the bottom of the drone, because most drones, they have a camera attached. So you're like, what do I do? Where do I put my 360 camera? So this is a way to kind of attach it to the bottom, as you can see there. See that little pole that hangs down? And you can see on that pole, there are little kind of dots right there, and those are like little rubber kind of stabilizers to kind of like minimize shake. So this is what we talked about earlier, mine the scene. Usually you can see here, we were talking about that overlap. So this is, this camera is going to see all the way to here, and this camera is going to see all the way to here. So this is where your overlap is. But this is specifically for a 4-camera rig. Every camera is going to have different stitching. So we were talking about parallax. So you can see right here, there's a hard stitch line, and I showed you earlier on the camera that exists as well. And that is mainly going to happen when things are close to your camera. So you have to be really careful of putting things close to the camera. And try to make the action happen in one lens if you can. Now, one of the things that happens in the stitching software is you can kind of customize it. So we can go in here and we can say, all right, let's fix this hand. Let's go in and stitch this together so we just see the full arm and the full, I don't know what this is here. And what would happen is the background would become unstitched. Because of the way the stitching software works, it can stitch either near or far.
I don't understand what caused that problem.
What causes the parallax?
Yeah, what was done wrong with the shot?
Nothing was done wrong, it's just that camera is really close to him. So that is just the camera seeing, it's distorted because it's a wide angle lens. So it's seeing this part of his body, and this camera is seeing a different angle of that part of his body. And so you need to kind of blend it and stitch it together so that it comes together. And you either need to stitch his arm or stitch the background. And usually the best way of doing that, like in this drone, you get the camera further away. further away you put the camera, the better the stitch is going to be.
So, can you use different lenses, different focal lengths, or are you always using a wide angle lens?
So the question is, can you use different lenses, or are you always using a wide angle lens? So what happens in a 360 image is you're trying to get everything. So you're always going to be using a wide angle lens. But you can set, if you have different lenses, you can set the focal length of each lens. And so a good example of that, and honestly, still to this day, we get so much questions and honestly lots of praise for the Bug VR project, because we used customizable macro lenses on GoPros. We ripped the lenses out of them and we put different lenses inside, and that gave us the ability to change the focal length and focus on the bugs that were literally right up on the camera. But there was no way to on the fly change that. So we had to do lots of different cuts to cut out the parts where it was like, that looks messed up. So just did our best. So you can put different lenses on GoPros. There is a different version of the Z-Cam that has interchangeable lenses. It's like double the price. But it is possible to do that. So this is something we've talked about. This is an example of a gimbal and a monopod. As you can see here, that monopod has legs on the bottom like this one, which you guys can't see from where you're sitting. Lighting. So one of the cool things about Mike, my co-producer, is he's really inventive. And I feel like you have to be in this medium. So one of the things that he found is a stick light. It's made by a company called Optica, and it looks like a lightsaber. So pulling that out was just really satisfying. So I'll show you guys kind of right now how it works. So on this monopod, if anybody can't see it, on this monopod I have the camera, which the Z-Cam is very tubular-like as well. From this camera, you completely can stitch out this monopod. So when you're considering lighting, you obviously don't want to see your lights. So what this allowed us to do is put a light within that area of the tripod so we can stitch out the light in post-production. So this light screws on here. And then the camera screws on top. So now, if someone can you come up here? So this now, if I follow my rules and put the light right around where my eyes are, camera there. This is where I would put the camera for this interview. And now she is lit, and we're going to put it back up on the computer here so that we can see what it looks like, the difference it makes.
Is that light using the camera's power?
No, the light is using its own. Okay, so I'm gonna have to. So one of the things that we had to do is we had to buy this little spacer here because I couldn't. Half the time you can't plug anything in when this camera is mounted. It's just kind of what you deal with. So now you know. So if we plug that in there, and for production purposes, we would kind of zip tie or Velcro these wires to the monopod so that we can stitch them out. I'm gonna pull the camera one back up here. I was very, very excited when we started using this because it was a very easy lighting option. It's not anything fancy, we're not getting any like 3-point lighting going on, but if we were in a situation, which a lot of times 360 video is using cameras that can't really pick up low light, so you want to be able to add a little bit of light. Not a lot of light, just a little bit of light. And this is a great option for doing that. So I'm going to pull up the preview again. And then, let's see here. So we can get the light. I don't know if you can really see up on the screen. It doesn't really show enough information. Oh, she's in the scene. She moved. Thank you. So you can see that we can light her. Now, actually, because of the screen, you can't see it too much. But, and basically, from this angle right now, you can, I don't see the light at all. So this is a really good option to be able to do that. Plus, it just looks really cool. Show up to that same client that was like poo-pooing on your GoPros with this thing. That's a Pro 360 video person there. Yeah, you can see. This is kind of an example of using that light with kind of the dramatic lighting.
Where is that light from?
This light is called Optica, Opteka. And I would think that it's most useful for interviews, is what I would say, when the subject is close. You can control its brightness. Just remembered that. Should have done that earlier, but just keep that in mind. I do want to show you that. So one of the things, let's say, okay, that's not enough light, and we want to put lights all around the room. So one of the things that you can do is you can paint out the lights. And later when we get into post-production, I'll actually show you an example of that. But I'll show you in this slide where we actually painted ourselves out. So you put lights around the room, you like to see how you want, and then you take the lights out of the room and take a video of just the room, a backplate of the room with no one in it. So in this is us directing. We had a preview camera over here, we had the script, we had audio monitoring, and you can see we're like literally like a foot away from the talent. She was making a phone call, had kind of a long script, and we even down on the tripod put some kind of a preview or a little snippet of the script so that she could reference it if she wanted to. We stitched all that stuff out. So if you look here, we are no longer there. We were able to direct the scene, literally stand there right by the actors, and now we're not in there anymore. Neither is the tripod or the script she was using. So that kind of shows you, the possibilities of getting good lighting.
Can you explain how you did that again? For yourself and the scene?
We'll go into that a little more. Basically, we just take 2 shots, as you can see here. One shot with us, one shot without us. That is not an example of the shot without us. The shot without us is literally no one in there.
So obviously that it's only going to work if the camera doesn't move.
That is only going to work if the camera doesn't move.
So basically, you would block out an area, create a plate,